Hi, this is Jeff, and I am going to talk more about what I found in the Oort Cloud. Now, initially, I had mentioned the Oort Cloud, there was comets, and I didn't really give any defined structure to it. But in fact, it is probably more structured than the surrounding solar systems that make up the kind of the soap bubbles uh, within the Milky Way galaxy. The Oort cloud is the lattice structure to the Milky Way galaxy. And it rotates, everything rotates around the galactic core at 450,000 miles per hour. So we're all going 450,000 miles per hour. And technically, that comet that I'd mentioned that had slammed into the Laurentide ice sheet at 50,000 miles per hour is probably going 400,000 miles per hour, but but on a relative basis, it's going 50,000 miles per hour. Anyway, so what is in the central part of the Milky Way? It's this giant black hole. But a black hole, we don't really know anything about it. We choose not to know about it, but it is essentially the pulse of life. You get there to the black hole, or just about there, you can use a gravitational slingshot to go wherever you want in the universe. And one of the first destinations that I'm interested in is the Andromeda Galaxy. Now, so all of us have probably seen a picture of the Andromeda Galaxy because it's that perfectly ordered galaxy that you see in all the photographs. Yeah, that's Andromeda. There's lots of other galaxies, hundreds of billions of galaxies, but Andromeda is the one that's like that picture perfect. It seems to be the manifestation of order. And that's what really clued me into the nature of the Oort cloud. What we're seeing in Andromeda is the groundedness of the life there in Andromeda. Because actually Andromeda is opposite as to how things are here on Earth. On Earth, things are very stable. In our 3D environment, things are extremely stable. People don't really believe that, but again, it's all relative. But we are truly blessed with an extremely stable 3D environment. And Andromeda, things are constantly changing. Reality is changing immensely, like moment to moment. If I can just say that, I don't know if time is in our artificial construct, but and there's just a handful of people on this planet that even know anything about the groundedness of Andromeda or the life force there. And one of those, you want evidence, here it is. So during the Vietnam War, there's a very famous photograph that Facebook had determined initially to be pornographic. It was the young girl that had been hit with napalm by the U.S. Air Force. There's another photograph that probably should be more famous, and that is some Buddhist monks burning themselves alive. Now, it's probably nothing. If somebody's really, suicide bombers and such, but, they actually lose control over themselves. These Buddhist monks exemplified groundedness. They maintained the lotus position without blinking an eye or twitching a muscle while their bodies burned, while their reality changed instantly and for a projected amount of time. Anyway, how can we get this? And, I'm not asking anyone to exhibit this type of groundedness. I certainly can't. But there are multiple times that this does happen, and how do we get there? Well, first of all, you have to be able to know how to travel. And we kind of already do. Air travel, for example, when you're traveling to Europe from the United States, you don't just travel in a straight line. Instead, you actually go north. You take the Great Circle route. You actually go north towards the North Pole. And that is the shortest way. So yes. And then there's that beer commercial about changing your latitude to change your attitude. It's the other way around. You need to change your attitude to change your latitude. And again, you're probably thinking this is all crap. I have more evidence. So, okay. During the Second World War, the city of St. Petersburg, then known as Leningrad, was under siege by the Nazis for over 1,000 days. Now, of course, they weren't under complete siege that whole 1,000 days, but they were shelled 1,000 days. But for that first year of the siege, it was a genuine siege. From pretty much August of 1941 all the way through to the following, actually early 1943, there was no land access to Leningrad. So only during the winters, and granted they are long, but Lake Ladoga, which is east of Leningrad, would freeze over, and they were able to bring in supplies, limited amounts of supplies, because the Luftwaffe and the German artillery, of course, knew of the supply line and made sure that the lake, what happens to bombs hitting ice, and things get kind of messy. So anyway, the people of Leningrad, they were, even the Red Army soldiers defending it, they were given a ration of 5 slices of bread per day. These are regular slices of bread, not giant loaves or anything, but 5 slices of bread. And everyone else, well, they had to make do with the turpentine that was in the wallpaper and the few rats that were able to find enough to eat as part of that food chain. So people were starving to death. And yet, there was, on August 9th, 1942, there was the Lenin premiere of, I'm going to butcher this guy, Dmitry Shostakovich's, wrong one. Sorry. Okay. Leaving up there, you can pause it, check Wikipedia. No one's really, Wikipedia is good for real news when, nobody thinks about stuff. If it's like something current events and stuff, like maybe you have to watch out. But something that happened, during the Second World War that most people don't care about. But this is extremely significant. Okay, the Red Army, the people of Leningrad, they knew they had to put this concert on. And it wasn't just for themselves, but it was for the world. And it is, Leningrad premiere. They had to, everybody was supposed to be listening to it, and including the German soldiers. They were listening to it, and that was the most significant part. Because, well, after that time, even though it seemed like Russia was going to lose the war, everybody there in Leningrad knew that the Germans would not enter that city. They knew. Anyway, it's part of the preparations for the concert. There was the Soviet Union. They had 3,000 shells of artillery that blasted the German positions before, to make sure that, there wouldn't be any interruption of the concert. Hecklers, they can be a real problem. And that's the way it is. That's definitely the power of sound. Because, you could change your latitude, and Leningrad's up there at 59.9 degrees north, so they didn't have that very far to go, but things were obviously stacked up against them. So they needed that kind of creative communication. Okay, where am I at now? Okay, remember my last video, and I had mentioned that, something in the New York Times that, it was like a set of Lenormand cards where, I'd read something and it would be like, oh yeah, that's what I was going to write about or record. Anyway, I said that, all I had to do was look, and it'd be another 15 minutes. And sure enough, after that, there's an article in Sunday Review, When Life on Earth Nearly Vanished. And this was regarding the Permian extinction. And, initially it was thought that, there's just like excess of volcanism that had raised CO2 levels on this planet, and it gives the deniers a chance to say, see, it's like stuff that we have no control. We have no control over these volcanoes. We have no control over the super volcano in Yellowstone. We have no control. We can't do anything. That's total bullshit. It wasn't the CO2 from, from these volcanoes, what had happened was that the lava had ignited the massive coal seam that had already developed in what was then Siberia. And because during the Carboniferous age, it wasn't the forest, the coal forests, they weren't like forests today where, a tree would grow and then when it died, it would fall down and, it probably made sounds even though there wasn't anybody here. And then, and it would decompose. And so there would be balance restored. Some CO2 would be re-released in slow formation as part of the normal metabolism. And, there would be fungi growing and there was bacteria, some animals would inhabit. That's how it is today. But back then, there were only plants. There were these giant insects, which indicated that the oxygen levels were extremely elevated, which made, like a very, a fire-friendly time. So that was another issue. But anyway, there were no fungi, the bacteria hadn't evolved to break down these trees. So these trees died and they compacted on each other without actually decomposing. And this is what formed the coal seams of which that we know of today. And back then in Siberia, these coal seams, which were thousands of feet thick, started to burn. And that's what caused the massive ignition of CO2 into the atmosphere at levels that are, in fact, we are burning through coal seams or burning through oil. Oil comes from algae that had died in a anoxic environment or in what would be low circulation, warm seas. The Tethys Ocean, the ancient Tethys Ocean, which the Middle East sits on today, was this shallow, warm sea, low in oxygen. And so all these algae, there would be the algae blooms, and then they would fall as they died after fixating lots of sunlight into sugars down to the bottom of the ocean, and then they got compacted. That's why it's light, sweet, crude. If you grind up dinosaurs or how other people think that oil's made, is that, there would be periods of time when there would be a super greenhouse effect on the planet, no ice caps, all that. And CO2 levels would jump up to 800 parts per million during the Jurassic and the Cretaceous, and there would be like a massive die-off, and that's where you get the sour formations of crude oil. Natural gas would be where the oil itself was cooked too much, and so it would become natural gas, and then but yet it was still under the capstones, and so it wouldn't be able to escape. Anyway, so obviously I'm talking about climate change, and everything is connected. And this is another thing, is that by now you know that I probably, New York Times again, never mind the ratings. Yeah, I don't mind the ratings anymore. Don't worry about what people think. And usually that's, on an individual basis, it's a really good thing, because that means that, yes, I'm speaking from the heart, not from the ego. Ego requires you to, it's more fear-based, and if you're motivated from the ego, that chances are it kind of leads to the bullying effect. And anyway, I'll get to that later. Okay, never mind the ratings, but I didn't really, it's this other article down here. It's about a year of new heights for the Dow, led by Boeing. Now, Boeing is an aircraft defense manufacturer based in the United States. Almost all of their major aircraft assembly areas are in Seattle. And Boeing is a lot different than aircraft manufacturing. It's a lot like making submarines. It's, even though there's a lot of computer design and automation involved, it's still very much, brick and mortar. You really can't. Once a worker is trained on how to build aircraft, it's more of a mindset that, or submarine that, because even if a single rivet is wrong, or if it's defective, it's going to cause the loss of an entire airplane, or in this case, a submarine. So it's not something that can be. So these are high-wage workers that have excellent job prospects. There's nearly 6,000 aircraft on back order by Boeing. It's all civilian aircraft. It's not counting the defense part of it. And what is interesting is that there's reasons to, just a second. Oh, sorry. I'm new at this, and I'm not going to stop. This is this week's Economist, Roadkill. It's about how the internal combustion engine is dying off. This is for ground transportation. It's not for aircraft. Fossil fuel, especially oil refined into jet fuel, is irreplaceable. You cannot have a solar-powered airplane. The energy of the sun, yes, it's immense, but it's too diffuse. And the second law of thermodynamics completely rules that out. It's only possible to have electric vehicles because of increased battery technology. But as far as battery technology was pioneered first in submarines. And that's because weight doesn't really matter as much. It's buoyancy that matters for submarines, not weight. So you can have heavy batteries, and it's actually having an electric motor and batteries in a submarine is a lot more efficient. These are ultra quiet vessels that can't be detected by the sounds of the engine. Okay, so that's why batteries and electric motors were pioneered first in submarines, because it fit perfectly. You can't have an electric motor running an airplane. You can't have a B-52 bomber with its payload of bombs to blast out some people that refuse to give up their rare earth elements or their fossil fuels, on an electric motor. You need fossil fuel. You need gasoline. You just do. That's science. And that is probably what I'm going to bring up now, is that, yes, science is real, but everything is connected. And you can't pick one thing and say, okay, because of climate change, we are going to expect people to give up all their cars without any kind of, expecting any kind of consequences, especially when, now what if it was switched the other way around? What if the Boeing aircraft factories were in Michigan and the auto factories were in Seattle? What would be the political makeup? Anyway, yeah. And that is something, because without Boeing, Seattle would be nothing. It wasn't that long ago when, towards the end of the Vietnam War, that there was a fall off in aerospace. There weren't as many airplanes getting shot down because the war was winding down. Also, that there was the first OPEC oil embargo, so the commercial air industry hadn't yet become dependent upon government subsidies as much, so they suffered a lot. And so there was a fall off in orders, and Boeing was shutting down factories. And there was a billboard outside of Seattle that said, "Will the last person leaving Seattle turn off the lights?" Yeah, and that's one thing, is that what made Seattle have Boeing was the Bonneville Power Administration and the dams built up during the Great Depression that provided virtually free electricity. At least it seemed to be free. The fact that the salmon runs were almost completely obliterated, seems to have no impact on most people, unfortunately. Anyway, it's that this is all connected. Okay, what was I going to say? So, and there's another issue that science refuses to acknowledge, and that is the systematic poisoning of the environment through the use of herbicides, pesticides, fertilizers. All of these have or have natural gas as a feedstock. And in the book, Rachel Carson's book, Silent Spring, it seems that the narrative is that she fought the chemical industry and won. And yes, it was a temporary victory in that, or it was a very singular victory of one point, is that DDT was taken off the market in the United States. It's still used throughout the third world, especially to control malaria. Anyway, that's getting really into things. But the thing is that there's poisons that are far more toxic that are being produced. You can get those poisons at any garden supply store, except for those stores that refuse to market that kind of stuff. And the examples in the book are, it's like heartbreaking, and they're an example of what the power of intent can do, even at 1 part per 50 million. There's a lake in Northern California that had a gnat problem. Nobody likes gnats if they think in terms of separation, if they don't view the gnats as having a right to exist at the same time. And so these fishermen and wildlife enthusiasts, I mean not wild, but wild area enthusiasts, they didn't care about the insects. They thought these gnats were a problem, and they thought they were doing the right thing. We're saying, well, there's this poison. It's at 1 part per 50 million. It's only supposed to kill the gnats. Well, it controlled the gnats for about a year or two, but then the gnats came back, and so they said, okay, well, maybe 1 part per 20 million. And they raised it up. And then after the third application, the gnats are still coming back. But the fish and the birds were dying. And they tested the fish and the birds. And there were fish that had 2,500 parts per million of this poison in the fish's flesh, which is Raid. The standard can of Raid is 1,000 parts per million. So the fish that these fishermen were eating was 2.5 times as toxic as Raid. I mean, they might as well have just got some Raid, some fish oil together, and put it on the stove, and to concentrate the poison a little bit, and that's what they were eating. And so, in this case, the poison had manifested itself and had become a life of its own, where even just what seemed to be just this very small microaggression had ballooned up into a very toxic, in which that environment where it's like they kept clamoring for more to keep controlling the gnats, but they were just killing off their livelihood all the same. So, okay. So anyway, about this Roadkill magazine article of The Economist. I'm going to get to that, and then I'll end this video. I know it's just like I kind of like go off on these tangents, and eventually it's all connected, and if you watch the next one, I'll tie them up. Okay, so there's a difference also, not only in terms of these electric vehicles or electric motors, that's different than the internal combustion engines of an airplane. So, and that's what this article, the Roadkill article in The Economist, mentions, is that electric motors don't require as much maintenance or cleaner, fewer moving parts. There's less stuff to break down, but it's also easier to automate the production, which means that a car manufacturing plant that manufactures electric vehicles, they're not going to need as many workers. And so, this this is a big issue because um, yeah, we can't just keep making airplanes. In fact, to solve climate change, we have to get rid of the poisoning of the environment. We have to stop the industrialized agriculture. People are going to have to grow their own food at the backyard scale. There would still be growing cereal grains and such, but still, it's like it'd have to go back to how it was 100 years ago, where everybody had a garden and they were growing things, and growing not just tomatoes but having fruit trees, berry bushes, having they have some logs, growing some mushrooms on those, and having some rabbits, chickens, of course, and then but the thing is about airplanes and commercial air transport is that there's no way to get out of, a single flight from Los Angeles to New York uses up 20% of, somebody's carbon footprint for the year. So it's like people that fly, whether, to make a statement. I always find it interesting that in the movie Inconvenient Truth, it shows Vice President Al Gore getting into a business class airplane seat to fly to a conference. And it was certainly possible to have teleconference technology at that time. Can I say hypocrisy? And that's commercial air transport will have to go. That's a sacrifice that the urban elites will have to make in order to show that they're serious about climate change, and also to get rid of the systematic poisoning of the environment. It's not fair to the people in flyover country to have told them that, yeah, just use these poisons and we'll give you cars, we'll give you, TVs and everything, and then we take away their cars and we say that they're at fault for all this stuff that's going on, when in fact, they're just they're just like us. It's just that they don't understand. They feel that they're being disenfranchised. Everything is relative. If somebody starts out poor, and they get like a little bit better off in their life, they think, wow, things are great. But if they start out kind of middle income, and their dad worked at a factory at $25 an hour, and then all of a sudden, they have to, like, I don't know, collect cans on the street or something, then they're going to be really pissed off. And so then that manifests into a lot of behaviors that are completely unacceptable. So that's it, and I know, but at this time, last time was 49 minutes, now it's less than half an hour. Thank you for watching.